I can see already Tijana on the screen because she will be joining us through the video. So hello, Tijana, the floor is yours.
Hello, hello. I hope you can all hear me. Yes, I think you can. I can even hear myself for a bit. So let me just set up myself a bit because I actually will use this clicker over the phone. So coming here today, even though it was only online, I was thinking, how do I put mental health or let's say wider well-being topic in only 20 minutes or even less because 20 minutes is very hard to listen nowadays. So I decided to focus on well-being at work, which is also my passion as a topic, and why every organization really needs a strategy nowadays to tackle the topic of mental health and well being. And I also will argue that this is no longer a choice that organizations have to tackle this topic or not. It is also a must if you want to attract, engage, and thus make productive and retain your talent, because we all know how talent is crucial for actually startup and scale up world, right? And I come from this world too. So my name is Tijana, and I work for a group called Superbet, but I work for a technology company that actually is a spin-off of this group. So I'm facing very similar difficulties when it comes to well-being and mental health in my own organization, and of course wider, as we can see. Now let me go back to kind of a bit. Now I cannot see the next slide. Just. I'm trying to, yes, now I can see it. Great. So just before that, I wanted to do a quick temperature check in the room about your own well-being. And if you think about the third year of the pandemic, the war around us and maybe some wider conflict in the world. If we think about, if we think about inflation and recession that everybody is scaring us about, let's just take a moment and think about, like, are we challenged by these things? Do you think your well-being is challenged by these circumstances around us? Now, of course, if you're saying, no, I'm not challenged by this, I would definitely like to grab a conversation with you. But if your answer is yes, definitely kind of listen up what I have to say in the next few minutes as well. Now, one good thing I would argue that came along with COVID or after COVID is that for the first time globally, we all had this shared experience of loss, of isolation, of everything that was happening during COVID, right? Quite abnormal situation. What this shared experience created is that for the first time, we, as I said, had same feelings and thus started sharing them more openly and honestly with the rest of the crowd. Now, that of course is captured on different types of social media, both at work and in our personal lives. So here's a few examples I just taken from my own phone by screenshotting it, right? You know, on the left side, you can see a Slack message where my colleague is not feeling well, she will not come to the call, so she will have another option, right? In the middle, widely discussed topic of this so-called crying CEO. There was a guy who had to lay off a lot of his employees and felt like posting a photo of him crying at LinkedIn. Now, we may think about this whatever we want. Do we like it? Do we think this is too personal to be posted on LinkedIn? But the fact is the trend is clear, right? The trend is that people started sharing about mental health, well-being, feelings, all of these, you know, touchy-feely things very publicly. And then on the right-hand side, you will not understand the language, which is maybe even better. It's a group of my friends, and I just captured this quickly on my WhatsApp group, right? How me and my friends are discussing, who actually live in different countries, how we are discussing our own mental health struggles, how we feel, and open more than ever before, in my own opinion. So now, of course, some started also joking about these things, right? Which is quite natural. If we see more than 1 billion of memes, right, that are daily shared between friends, colleagues, and family, we can see that this also became a topic of kind of like a joke and a bit of fun. Now, of course, a disclaimer: this sharing of memes cannot really help your mental health and well-being. It can only maybe improve your mood temporarily, but it will not really help you. So Then you might ask, of course, what can we do? And jokes aside, why would we care? Right? Why should you care? Whether you're an employee, a manager, maybe a founder, or an investor as well. Why should you care? Sorry, I'm just having a bit of difficulties with the slides. So there is a clear trend as well that I found actually on Google, which is quite interesting. Google shows us that the words of mental health and well-being, there is a clear trend of people searching for these words. Now, I actually ask myself, okay, if these are the people actually searching for this word, imagine how many of those are not typing this word in their Googles, right? So the trend is clear that this is becoming a huge topic of interest when it comes to global population, and the trend is on the rise. Sorry, I'm having this now. Of course, 69% of population, according to the recent study in the US, claimed that this was the most stressful time of their entire professional career, including major events like September 11 in the US and also 2008 Great Recession. So obviously, everybody, in the employee workforce is actually facing these similar issues. And yet, of course, obviously, the decision makers are not seeing the picture quite the same way. They're hugely underestimating how people feel in their organizations. Here is another research where we see on the left side employees' self-reported well-being versus on the right side actually what executives think that people are feeling, right? So we see a huge disconnect. Now, of course, if you still don't care as a human to human about relationships of people and how they feel, I will invite you to take a look at this graph, right? And this graph explains actually the relationship between well-being and stress to actually productivity, right? If you go up to the stress and burnout, and if it becomes unmanageable, actually this will relate to absenteeism, intention to leave, and poor performance. According to the World Health Organization, depression and anxiety have a significant economic impact, and it can be measured even in trillions. So in that sense, it's also an economic issue that we have. So it's not just about, are you a great human and do you care about others and others' mental health and well-being? It's actually a business problem. And that's why I'm arguing today you need a business strategy to tackle this rather than just tackle it as one of the topics in HR. Now, moving forward, of course, the question is, what can we do? And now, what can we do? First things first, right? We need to understand what it takes to be well. Now, well-being often gets talked about just as a mental health issue. However, there is a wider perspective on what well-being really means, right? First, there is the psychological or mental aspect. However, there is also a physical aspect, and we can easily see that again in the examples of COVID. Then, of course, there is a social aspect of well-being. Again, something really disrupted by, let's say, things like COVID, right? Where you're isolated, where you're lonely, where you cannot work normally on your social relationships. So that's also a big aspect of well-being that often gets overlooked. Then again, environmental aspect of well-being. Maybe the environment that we're living in is not actually clean enough for us to thrive in this environment. I will actually share one interesting fact. I am originally from Belgrade, Serbia. Belgrade, Serbia, that is actually in Southeast Europe, is the most polluted city actually in winters, which is quite shocking, right? And that for sure affects the well-being of the nation that actually lives there, right? And then moving on to the economic or so-called financial part of well-being, something that of course your workforce is definitely worrying about, especially if there is inflation and recession coming along, right? So to understand well-being, we need to look at all the aspects of well-being, not just mental health, because ultimately they're all interrelated, right? Now, of course, I also want to talk about certain actions that we may take as a result of this. So first, I will always argue that there is much more we can do that actually costs zero rather than things that actually cost a lot of money. So today, I actually want to talk about all these things that, on one hand, have a cost to it, on the other hand, might have zero cost to it, but are much more influential and matter much more to your workforce. So sorry, I updated my slides in the meantime, but I don't have them here. It's okay. So I will just quickly talk through some of the ideas. What are those things that you could do that do have some cost, but again, I have some ideas that this cost shouldn't be too large. So listen up. So first things first, you should, if you have a global workforce and you're not located only in one location, I don't know how many of you are working globally here, access to good healthcare is something that you should enable your employees to have. Now, not every country has a great healthcare system, the state one, right? So it's important that as an organization, you find solutions to actually maybe top up the healthcare for your employees depending on their location, right? Where they will find actually the most struggles. The other idea, right, is so-called employee well-being programs and employee assistance programs. Now, this became very popular, especially in the times of COVID, and it's highly appreciated by employees, even in my own organization. Now, what this means is that you would maybe partner up with an organization who offers counseling or psychotherapy over, let's say, online resources. Sometimes they offer it also in person. Now, one good trick to actually save up a bit of money, don't necessarily go for the global providers because they have global pricing. Actually, maybe go for some local organizations in countries where your employees are to enable them to actually use these services because, again, they will be much cheaper if you take them locally. And they will also be in their own native language. Another thing you could do that costs a bit of money but not too much. There is an organization in the UK, I will not advertise it now, but you can research it later, that actually can train mental health and well-being first aid champions, right, in your organization. So you can train up people very easily to kind of spot and have those basic conversations with the employees of how you can tackle maybe some issues, or at least direct those employees to the relevant resources or relevant programs like EAP in case they feel that they're facing some, bigger issues. So this is a really smart strategy that you can easily apply and get those champions actually spreading the word about mental health and well-being inside the organization as well. And then another thing may not sound that easy, but then it kind of is as well. It means adjusting your global leave policies, right? So again, just like healthcare, not every country has very human-centered policies when it comes to annual leave, compassionate leave, and all of these things, right? Try to put a base minimum, no matter where your employees are. Are they in Singapore? Are they in the US? Try to put a base minimum of what do you want as the organization to give to your employees. If somebody, let's say, has a loss in the family or, some network, give them at least, let's say, 5 days of compassionate leave, right? Not just because in that country this is possible, but because that should be maybe done, right? You can also equalize, let's say, maternity and paternity leaves by internal policies. No matter what the state says in those countries, you can always actually top up things in the countries where people don't have access to these kind of leaves. But of course, fairness and equity matters in that sense. So why would your employee be treated in a different country differently than yours? So in that sense, I would say equalizing your global policies for leave would be one step forward. Of course, you could argue this has a cost to it because, of course, you're enabling people to take more days off. However, I will tell you, in my organization, we actually have unlimited PTO, right? Unlimited vacation policy, which means, of course, people can be taking from 20 to 40 days if they like a year, right? So obviously it's possible. Now, I also want to move on to the things that actually require zero cost, and the list is much longer. And this is where I want to spend the majority of my time today, right? So first, I want to talk about compassion and empathy as values, right? And these are the things that actually you should hire, promote, and fire people based on. Now, this sounds a bit, I would say, maybe too aggressive. However, if you hire people who don't have compassion, empathy, who are not how to say, directed and human centered, you will never grow your business. I mean, you will scale it maybe to a certain point. However, that will stop you sooner rather than later, right? So, compassion and empathy as values, especially in leaders that you're hiring. Then again, I would say engage your leaders to share and also be vulnerable. Gone are the days of leaders who are, untouchable and they don't ever talk about problems. They always feel all right. People connect to people who they feel that they're similar to them, who are struggling with the same things. So, in that sense, it's very important to encourage leaders to share about their own well being issues or about their own struggles that they're having, because people will then have have more freedom to also share, and you will also create a better trust in your organization. So, benefits are really multiple. And then, of course, prioritize and plan ahead. I know for startup and scale up world, this is this may seem really, this may seem very impossible. However, I would argue it is possible. It's something that we should definitely keep in our mind. How do we prioritize the most impactful things and not really disperse our energy all around? And then again, startup and scale up world context, do not glorify overworking, right? That can get you only so far. Actually, previous presenters, I liked how they said this previously. Take care about your own well being, right? Because sooner rather than later, it will come back for you. So, this is not something that you can just leave behind. Recognize that just anyone could be struggling even without you knowing about it, right? Each of us has different struggles, and no matter big or small, objectively or subjectively, right? They're our own struggles. So recognize that, and always think about, whenever you're giving feedback to somebody, right? Think about, okay, how they were actually doing in the past period. Again, planned vacations, time off, and proper handover. Now, this handover, the last part, I would say it's crucial, right? Oftentimes we go off, we don't even put the out of office reply, and we expect that, okay, when we come back. But, do a proper handover, delegate things so you don't come back from vacation and then spend another 20 days doing things that you were supposed to obviously do during your vacations. Then, one thing that I'm specifically passionate about and want to kind of spread the word is when it comes to workspace and how we work, right? There were many discussions about, are we remote? Are we hybrid? Should we go 5 days, 2 days, 3 days? But the fact is, you should always do flexibility, choice, and autonomy. These are the principles you should be led by, not is it remote or is it in person, right? Of course, there are some routines that are valuable for people to be in person, but a lot of things can be done remote or in a hybrid way. But the main principles are flexibility, choice, and autonomy. And if you give them as well, that also increases the well-being and also mental health state of your employee population. And then, last but not least, of course, say and allow others to say, no, I can't, I don't want to, right? And it sounds counterintuitive saying that in a scale up or startup or everything, but allow people to say no, because sometimes some no may be a good no in terms of leading us to a much more sustainable future. And then sometimes I would argue, right? Just being human and asking somebody, are you okay, is all it takes. So thank you very much. I open the stage for any questions you might have.
Yes, thank you, Tijana. Let's give it up.